Hi, I'm Pizzawolf.
And I'm TenderLovingCares.
And you're listening to the second season of Horngry for More, the internet's favorite podcast about fetishism.
By the community.
And for the community.
I'm hungry. I'm so hungry. Yeah. I'm hungry. I'm so hungry. Yeah.
This week we wanted to thank our Patreons, Butterfly Blob and Klumpen, Ayanami, Rorik and Salad Dodger for making this episode happen. If you want to do the same, you can do so at patreon.com/h4m.
Well, TLC, we had a great previous episode about video games and fat and fetus representation in video games. Tons of community response on that, right?
Yeah, who would have thought? We got so many
amazing.
people mentioning other games, so really just go check out on Phoebe. We had some awesome threads, people mentioning a bunch of other games. We actually talked about some other games that we literally couldn't fit it into the podcast, so I'm gonna be uploading some outtakes. We talked about Fat Princess, we talked about the Pandarans in World of Warcraft, just some personal experiences we've had with them. There might be a little bit more fat representation than we thought, but there's also still not even close to enough. I think that's the take-home message we got from that episode.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the takeaway. I was really pleased to see the level of engagement we got in some of the discussion threads that popped up on Phoebe. We have professional video game journalists commenting. We have people who work in video game art commenting, and and shockingly, fat people like this stuff.
Yeah, sure.
No, I'm kidding. Everyone likes it. But no, it was a lot. It was a lot of fun. And it was really kind of illuminating too to have pros, because I mean we're kind of amateurs at this, but have some pros peel back the curtain a little and show us a little bit more deeper and nuanced look into the video game industry. If that happens on every episode, I will be tickled pink. So thank you to those of you who participated in that.
This week we have something, again, a little bit new, and it kind of ties a little bit in with my nerdy side again, because to those people who have actually read Horngry the magazine, they know that ages ago I put up what we've just started referring to as the Feedism Kink Matrix, or I think originally someone...
The hexagons.
The hexagons. Someone really early on called it the Fat Bible, and I love the term for it, even though that's not...
Sacrilege.
Yeah. What it basically was that I kind of tried to divide a whole different aspects and whole different subkinks that are in the fetishism community into one neat OCD looking graphic with a bunch of hexagons, just to represent how diverse the fetishism spectrum can be, and that there's so many different subkinks. Some people will be into all of them, others will be only into a very select few, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a place for everyone within fetishism, and it also borrows from other kinks that have intersected with fetishism. And you had an awesome idea on how to kind of translate this into the podcast.
Yeah, that's right. I was inspired by the OG Stephen Colbert when he had the Colbert Report. He did a segment on it called Better Know a District, where he was going to go to all 535 voting congressional representatives districts in the U.S. and meet them one by one. He got nowhere close to being done with it,
close.
But it was. Yeah, but we have a slightly more modest, less ambitious goal in covering these, and we figured, a lot of the kinks that you kind of hear when you've been in the community for a while mentioned are not kind of straight up fetishism. One partner feeds the other, or mutual, mutual fetishism, or so they incorporate something else, or there's an aspect of it that really turns someone on, and it can be everything from tight clothing to button popping to a fat person struggling with exercise or something like that, to specific growth. And again, if you look at the matrix itself, you'll be able to kind of see all of these, but we really wanted to take a moment to drill down deeper and get you to better know a kink, is I think what we're going to be calling it. So TLC and I, in our unrelenting quest to categorize the entire kink internet, we've spent some time researching going into these kind of fetus adjacent kinks, learning a little bit about their history, learning about kind of their appeal. Some of these kinks we have, some of them we don't.
Yeah.
We're not
we'll
trying to
take it as we go. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not issuing any statement here
No.
as to the validity of one kink over another. None of them are better, none of them are worse. They're just kind of different facets of the wonderful gem of internet fat kink sex fetishism or whatever we're calling it. Man, I'm bad
Yeah.
at giving labels to things.
Because our idea is to basically explain throughout next episodes, and it's not going to be they're not going to be all in a row. We'll sparse them out over the coming months, but we want to take at least 10 minutes to give you an overview of what one of those subkinks is, where it comes from, how it intersects with fetishism, so that by the end of our journey, hopefully we'll have one short little clip for each of those subkinks. So new people who haven't heard of them can check them out, can get an overview of what it's like, and others who are already familiar with can give their inputs in the comments and let us know what they thought.
Yeah, and maybe if you've always wondered what what padding or what blueberry fetishism is, but never wanted to kind of go down that road yourself, you can listen to trusty old Pizzawolf and TLC give you just the merest peek into it. Yeah, and if you wanna explore from there, it's up to you. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I say a lot and I find to be very true is that kink understands kink.
Yeah.
And as a result of kind of entering the kink community through largely what would be under the umbrella of fetishism, I found other kinks which have kind of appealed to me over time. And, who knows, we could be going down a very dangerous path and realize we're into all sorts of new stuff. Both of us have been in the community for well over a decade now, mm-hmm. So I don't think it's likely that we have some stones that we haven't turned over yet, but who knows?
You never know. Yeah.
So that's the disclaimer. Listen at your own risk. You may find that you are into something that you did not think you were.
Yeah.
What we hope to do is give you a kind of a brief history of the kink and its representation, in the various kink communities, what it's about. And then, how it interacts or how it relates to fetishism more generally.
And for this episode, I am going to be talking all about fat worship and belly worship, while Pizzawolf, you're going to take us through the fascinating world of the blueberry kink.
That's right. Going blueberry right out the gate.
You want to start?
Sure thing. Yeah, I was really interested when I selected the kink for this week, which is blueberry fetishism, because it really seems like a specific scenario that has almost universal recognition within the kink community and outside of the kink community. Obviously, and I feel like I might not have to say this, but in the event that I do, obviously, the roots of blueberry fetishism are very singular, which is kind of different from a lot of the other kinks we have.
Definitely, yeah.
And it really traces back, maybe not so much from the book itself, the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but the 1971 film, certainly Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and then also the 2005 remake as well. But that 1971 film, it's been shown to children, for basically ever, probably until they made the remake, and people still probably watch both. But in the original, the character Violet Beauregard was played by, in 71, Denise Nickerson, and then in 2005, Anna Sophia Robb. Violet Beauregard is on a tour of the Chocolate Factory. She gets 3-course dinner gum, which she chews, gets all the way through the roast beef and the mashed potatoes to the final course, dessert, which is blueberry pie. At that point, she begins to turn blue and then inflate, blow up, expand into a blueberry. What happens from there varies in what type of adaptation of the source material it is.
Basically, it can be like different shades of macabre. Is that a word in English?
Yeah. We say macabre.
Macabre.
We just kind of leave out the extra syllable.
Okay.
But no, it's it's a weird thing because very rarely are we able to look at a kink and say, wow, that comes from right there. But here we have that opportunity. And really what I kind of think it is, using a food metaphor, this is like being a fan of, a ham and cheese sandwich before you knew that bread and cheese and meat were invented, if that makes sense. and if it doesn't, I'll tell you what I mean. So it seems like, so again, we're taking this back to 1971.
Yeah.
We are solidly pre-internet here.
Yes.
This is well before kink was widespread, and the bar for entry was much higher. So if anyone wanted to produce anything, not only are they going to have like a lot of physical restrictions on what they're able to produce, distributing it is also going to be nigh impossible. I don't know what kinksters did in the 70s. Probably not much. Certainly
Smoke
not
signals.
as much. Yeah, smoke signals, coded messages, disappearing ink. Who knows? A spy network.
Pigeons.
Carrier pigeon, sure. Like in the war. No, but you look at the things that blueberry fetishism touches, which you could say would include size fetishism. This small person expanding into a great big blueberry. Expansion fetishism, the fact that they're going from small to large. Even some sort of transformation fetish, becoming fruit-like, or in some cases a fruit itself. She has juice in her. Changing colors, turning blue. All these things are, then you also have tightening clothes and popping clothes. Famously in the original movie, her red belt blows off, and that kind of sends her into a spherical arrangement, I guess. So it's all these things at once, but it all came long before those things happened originally. So it was like the completed product was there that had all these elements before people could really say, oh, I'm an expansion fetishist. They really didn't know. There really wasn't a language for I'm an expansion fetishist. I like to see body parts or people expanding, because the only thing there was a Violet Beauregard turning into a blueberry.
Well, I don't know. I might be off here, but I mean, she inflates in a way that just doesn't really happen naturally. So it's not something that you're even gonna see if you haven't actually seen this kind of special effect. And special effects were around for a while, and I guess there's been animation and stuff like that. But the 70s was still pretty early on, even for television history, when it came to what, like, they don't have the kind of expansion, even the special effects that we see nowadays for different kinds of expansions. So that might just have been like the first time they actually saw such an unrealistic expansion to some extent.
That's very true. It's we certainly didn't have the access to video editing that we do today. For the common person. And again, the type of these were practical effects in Willy Wonka. This was a suit that was inflating. This was not not CGI or anything close to. I mean, you'd need a computer the size of a football field.
Yes.
But no, this was something that would be near impossible for the home hobbyist to do. There have since been within the blueberry community, which I took a enjoyable dip in. There have since been some fetish content producers who have rigged their own expansive suits and things, and as the practical effects got cheaper. But at the time, this was unique. You didn't have people changing colors. You didn't have people blowing up. You didn't have big people being rolled around. You had none of that. All you had was Violet. And strangely enough, Violet appearing in the 71 movie is kind of perfectly timed for the first wave, people who were kids in the 70s watching that movie, was when they were 5 to 10, hitting the initial internet boom of the 90s and the late 80s and 90s, when they're 18 to 30 now. And so Violet featured very heavily in those initial kink communities. I think it's also something to note that because of the tools available at the time for photo editing, this is kind of speculative on my part, but early pre-Photoshop days, it was easier to kind of lay a tinted filter on something and then kind of put human hands and a head on a blue circle or a blue gradient sphere you'd created instead of individually like morphing or manipulating body parts larger. So it was a relatively easy kink to kind of replicate in fantasy. So there's a ton of like mid 90s to early 2000s celebrity like blueberry inflation art out there because I think it was relatively easy to reproduce, and there was I guess a golden age of it right around 1998.
This totally reminds me of very early on within the first season. We mentioned, I'm sorry, this is not like one of those rabbit holes of mine, but and I'm not into it, I swear. I know it's going to start to seem like it, but
famous last words. Go ahead.
The quicksand kink was a thing that had also this very singular moment within television history where it all started. And since quicksand is something that as an effect or even a plot device within movies or television series completely vanished, also the kink community around it has started to die out slowly but surely. It's like you can see this whole kink community around it really age and come to a point where there's not really a new generation coming behind it except for some outliers. And like at least with Willy Wonka, we have several adaptations. We've had the Johnny Depp adaptation recently, and there might be other ones coming in the future. So I'm just gonna start wondering if because like when you see the younger people within the Feedism community, I have a feeling that I'm seeing the whole like Blueberry Kink less and less, and maybe it's gonna start to rise again once the generation who was around 5 or 7 when this new remake came out is gonna start hitting the internet again. Who knows?
Maybe and maybe not. I mean, I feel like there's now enough space on the internet where, if you're interested in some other either size fetish or expansion fetish or transformation fetish, you can kind of hit those more directly than backdooring your way in through the Violet Beauregard blueberry inflation scene in Willy Wonka, and people might not be drawn to it, but who knows? Who knows? They very well might be. It's certainly still kind of a hugely resonant moment in pop culture, especially when you think of other things from 1971, that are coming up on 46 years old now. You're talking about immense staying power, and it's been there have been multiple cartoons that have done similar blueberry expansion stuff. It's been done in, I think, The Simpsons and Family Guy have both done it. A live action version was done in That 70s Show with Mila Kunis as the Violet Beauregard stand-in. Much to the delight of
I was gonna say
many a teenage expansion fetishist, I'm sure. So it's exactly the type of thing that still definitely strikes a nerve with people. How it relates to fetishism, a little bit more complicated. So I'm actually going to kind of work backwards with that because the Mila Kunis bit was different. This featured her character turning into a blueberry via gaining weight because she was eating a bunch of blueberry pies. She didn't, so it's kind of a little bit more played into the eating part of kind of auto fetism. And
how
then
have I missed that?
I'll link you.
Okay,
don't worry.
Thank you.
I mean, it's garbage practical effects, but it's still pretty funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's close enough for us. Don't worry. But as far as its relation to fetishism, the idea of like a food that never stops or a super fattening food, those are kind of tied into the kink somewhat. The swelling up or filling up with things. Sometimes the fetists find the appeal of I'm being filled with food or filled with this is a little bit different because it's blueberry juice and it's being produced internally. So a lot of it when I tried to like look down into it more deeply, it seemed more fetist adjacent than explicitly fetist, but it has so much it starts out when Violet begins to expand, it looks like she's just getting chubby. Her shape rapidly changes into something more spherical, and eventually is just basically a big ball like a blueberry. but it starts looking very much like, a weight gain expansion type thing, which obviously has more resonance with the fetishism community as well.
Yes.
And then as far as the size, the size itself, you're talking about a character, tripling, quadrupling her size in the 2005 remake, which was done with CGI. Not only is it significantly more anatomical as far as the expansion goes, but it's also much bigger. In that one you see Violet's like arms and hands slowly sink into her blueberry body, and it has a lot. I rewatched all of them and I was like, wow, that first one was bad.
And it happens within seconds, right? If I remember it correctly.
Yeah. I mean, there's some cutaways and stuff, but you take a moment or two to look at them and you realize kind of how starved we were, or our predecessors were. Neither of us were alive in 71. Yeah. Not quite that old. But no, so it's kind of interesting to me as it's definitely closer to fetishism than a lot of other kinks that are completely unrelated, like, say, I don't know, I'm not even going to name one.
No, but you have some parallels that you still see in fetishism. One of them is it might have introduced instant weight gain into fetishism, like magical weight gains in other aspects, because that's something that I don't know if we've seen other examples before that came out. And there's also I've seen a lot of artwork on DeviantArt who will reference the more spherical form of like even weight gain expansion, even if it's not blue, as the blueberry shape. And there's a bunch of round fruits. It's still like an homage to the original blueberry scene. So
yeah, absolutely. When people say they're apple shaped or pear shaped, sometimes round all over gets blueberry shaped.
Yeah.
But again, you can just kind of see how much this thing pokes itself into culture.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it really was fascinating. So who knows? I don't know if there's going to be a great second renaissance of blueberry fetishism on the horizon or not. But it unquestionably deserves much credit, and for that I salute you, blueberry fetishism.
So the kink that I've actually chosen to go into in this episode is gonna be fat worship, and to some extent even more belly worship.
Oh, and surprise
surprise. I don't know what you're talking about. It's a fascinating and amazing subkink, and to some it's gonna be very obvious, but it might not actually be that obvious as some might think. So what is it? It sounds very obvious. It's really what it says. It's about fat being worshipped, being adored, being admired, and would kind of think that within fat admiration and fetishism, that's always going to be the case. And I hope it is for everyone. We all like fat people. That's why we're all here. But as a kink aspect in and of itself, in the way I had it in mind for the Kink Matrix, it's that it's somewhat of a counterpart to the teasing and humiliation aspect within fetishism. So while humiliation, for example, often overlaps with fetis being more on the submissive side of a power play if you choose to have one, worshipping would be kind of more the dominant counterpart of it. So it can be physical, it can be worshipping specific body parts or size in general, or it can be more of a characterization, meaning like elevating the feedie or the receiver of that worship as kind of like royalty, or I've heard even like people referring to their feedies as deities within a roleplay scenario. So that's basically where I come at when I was thinking about fat worship or belly worship specifically. And belly is just one body part, but there can obviously be other kinds of fat body parts that you choose to worship. So where does it come from? And are there like specific origins? And this one is obviously a lot more vague than the wonderful blueberry episode that you did.
Yeah.
But I do think there's like some things in history that we can like look back on, because when we look at a lot of old deities that old civilization used to worship, but even later, like when we look at how some of the depictions of Romans or even just royals in medieval ages were fat, was worshipped as this kind of status symbol. And I definitely think that's kind of some of the origin that there might be to this whole like fat worship.
I think you have a really good point in that, kind of the celebration of excess has like a maybe it's just our deeply fetist scurry brains can't comprehend it, but I could never imagine, I could never imagine worshiping the absence of a belly. Like there is no like skinny contrapositive for this type of thing. It's a celebration of that which is, not that which is not. And there are some people who I'm sure are going to be very, very happy and very, very pleased at the fact that they've, lost weight or they don't have the belly they used to have. And I suppose that's all well and good. But in terms of like worshiping that or like, treating it as, this like almost I don't want to say spiritual, but like this abundance, this, that seems deeply tied to like to notions of fat that we've processed once societally and now kind of in our own little corner.
Yeah.
That concept seems to go along with it pretty nicely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it in terms of what it's not. So, so we're going to assume that like anyone listening to this podcast, unless they've just gotten deeply lost on YouTube or the algorithms are not functioning properly and you're being directed here by like a I don't know, how to make Thanksgiving stuffing video.
Yes.
If as long as that's not happening, we assume that on some level you're into fat. And if that's the case, we know it expresses it in itself in a myriad ways. So like how would you treat belly worship different from, say someone who's into like, weight gain teasing or humiliation or kind of more of that, like you definitely like it, but it comes out as
you like it in both of those examples, you like it in both of those instances. But yeah, when you're actually focusing on teasing, you're to some extent playing into how being fat is this taboo and how like titillating it can be to just kind of use nicknames that used to have a more like negative connotations, like piggy or stuff like that, or like teasing that actually kind of teases someone for, oh, look how fat you've gotten, you don't even fit into your clothes. And there's obviously it's always, or it should always be coming from a very like loving place, but it does put the receiver a lot of times into this more submissive role.
Mm-hmm.
While the belly worship would be, for example, I've seen a lot of parallels for people who are into size contrast, people who are into, for example, like squashing or face sitting. You know what I mean? As soon as the feeder or the encourager or the admirer tends to be more on the submissive side themselves, it'll often turn into this kind of like special form of like worshipping the receiver, like the feedee in this example,
being subservient to that massive-ness.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to float a somewhat weird literary reference here. I'm going back real far to Ovid, the Roman poet, and the Pygmalion, the other type of pig we're talking about here. The Pygmalion, where famously someone built a sculpture and then fell in love with it. I think there's also kind of that and you've seen that trope repeated again in like My Fair Lady or even Frankenstein or Weird Science or stuff, Mannequin, stuff like that.
Definitely, there's so many adaptations of that kind of like story. Yeah.
But you can also kind of draw that parallel, that through line with fetishism, where you worship the thing you create. If you're a feeder and you work hard to put this huge belly on this person who is typically might not have anywhere near as huge a belly, but for your hard work and influence, it makes sense to kind of make sense, maybe not make sense, none of this makes sense, but it's understandable.
All of this makes sense. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, it makes sense to us.
Yes.
But it's understandable that you would want to really revel in that creation. And it's obviously it's also teamwork, but I think there's kind of, I can certainly see the appeal in working, and this is a little bit of inside baseball here, but kind of working with a partner for over weeks and months and years and meals and thousands of calories and this and that, there's a sense of pride and a sense of joy, that you feel knowing that you put those pounds on them, or I've seen it the other way too, or that they put those pounds on me. And you you want to be happy with the thing you made, so the urge to kind of to treat it particularly specially, even up to the level of worship, kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Another way that I saw where it often might overlap with Feedism is like very specific like role play scenarios that you'll also see in weight gain fiction, for example. And that's this fantasy of, I've actually seen it more with like dominant male gainers, gay gainers, as well as some straight gainers, that they want to have this servant who just provides them food
Bring
all
me
the time.
food. Yeah, sure.
That ties like strongly into BDSM to the point where it almost borders outside of Feedism. But when we're talking, like, we're still talking about them gaining weight, about them being fat, but it's still something that in my opinion goes into this worship, because as I've said in the beginning, it can be physical, meaning like worshiping very specific body parts or the size in general, but it can also be more on this character level where you worship this status role that the feedee has and the receiver of that worship has.
Well, it definitely seems like it's kind of in a role reversal of how the kink used to be publicly perceived, as it was always going to be a dominant feeder and a subservient feedee.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's 100% a trope which is underrepresented historically in the kink, but is gaining more as we kind of become more inclusive of non-traditional approaches to it, where we have either like someone's royalty or a god or goddess or something that just and demanding tribute and what's theirs. And I know that there are some supplicants who are all too willing to provide tithes and offerings.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Even sure. Especially for people who are into contrast, for example, like it seems to be also this flip side to contrast, that the reason why you're so much into this huge size difference is because this huge size difference is so imposing, and it's definitely something that I'm into, for example, because it feels like humiliation, for example, has always been something that felt very alien to me, even though I completely understood it coming from this very loving place. It always felt like, because size has always been something so fascinating to me, and especially with me being as a smaller feeder, it always felt so natural to also add this worshipping part of it. That is like, I'm so tiny and look at this huge, amazing, wonderful belly, that's, I don't know, that's just where I came from. Yeah.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's certainly an aspect of the kink that I've personally enjoyed being on the receiving end. It's good to feel like the king every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think that really hits on a lot of the appeal of belly worship, both from the worshiper and the recipient of the worship. Well, those are the first two installments in our Better Know a Kink series. You're going to be able to find these eventually all linked together on the Horngry Feedism Kink Matrix or Kink Bible, whatever we're calling it.
Fat Bible.
The Fat Bible. Yeah.
No, it's let's call it the Kink Matrix, because Fat Bible just seems so preposterous.
Okay. So. Well, on the Horngry Feedism Kink Matrix, you'll be able to see all these linked together. We'll probably continue to cover them either as standalone little uploads, or they might feature into new episodes if we find ones that are particularly interesting.
Yeah.
As always, if we got it wrong, if we got it right, if there's some of those kinks on the Matrix that you want us to cover in the future, feel free to let us know. Drop us. We're pretty good at messages. Talk to us on Phoebe. Leave us comments. We make posts plugging these. It's really fun to get feedback. As always, you can find us. Also you can find me on Phoebe as Pizzawolf.
And I'm TenderLovingCares on Phoebe. I'm Horngry on Grommr and Chaseable. And I have my Tumblr, which is tenderlovingcares.tumblr.com, my website, which is horngrymagazine.com. And check us out on YouTube and on iTunes and on SoundCloud and wherever you can find us, basically.
Yeah. So until next time, I'm Pizzawolf.
And I'm TenderLovingCares.
See ya.
Bye.
I'm hungry.
Called it the Fat Bible, and I love the term for it, even though that's not
sacrilege.
Yeah.
That's okay. God isn't real.
Okay.
Hot controversy here on Horngry for more. I'm just trying to get our follower count up. You know.
That's gonna work. Yeah.